Welcome back to Area DMG. I'm your host, Philip Wesley, the Mile High Mouth, and for today's episode of Suki Nihon, we are looking at episode 8, or rather, 8 of Season 1 of Berserk, the 2016 series. This episode is called Reunion in the Den of Evil. So, from where we were at the end of the last episode, Guts has found Casca, and there's a big fight between, Guts, the heretics, the demon things, and then the Holy Iron Knights get in there, and it just, stuff hits the fan, essentially. Casca, Isadora, Doru, Nina, and Puck escape while Guts takes out the horrible goat creature, and this leads to a fight on the cliffside with Serpico, which works pretty well, actually. Pretty good fight. Guts is finding it kind of difficult to fight because he can't really draw his sword, and it's kind of going badly for him until he literally just grabs a hold of Serpico's sword and just breaks it apart with his hand. Just like, he's like, "You're gonna cut off your fingers if I move." Nope. I mean, we've seen him do this before in other things where he's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna bite the blade that you're trying to kill me with and just break it," which is great. This show is pretty fantastic for that. So, this is happening, and then Serpico manages to escape, but the egg-shaped apostle leads Joachim, Nina's old little, quote, friend, end quote, that betrayed the heretics to the Holy Iron Cross Knights. Anyways, the egg-shaped apostle leads Joachim over to Casca and Nina, and they get captured, and then Luca, Guts, and Isadora go out to rescue them. Nina gets dragged off to be horribly tortured in Mazgus's little torture dungeon thing, and Guts steps up to the entrance of the tower, and that's pretty much the end of this particular episode. Stuff is going to go horribly wrong for everybody in the next episode, and overall, I'm pretty much looking forward to that, because this show, I know it doesn't really follow the manga as closely as we'd like. I mean, we really would have liked the Lost Children saga, that little story arc, the whole thing with the Count, all those things. But I think this weirdly sped up version of this works for what they're trying to do. I mean, if this had a budget like, say, the movies, or even if this had an animation budget that was similar to stuff like, let's be honest about Berserk. Berserk is not a wide appeal show. I mean, it's a good show, but it's not a wide appeal show. It's not a Naruto or a Fairy Tail or a One Piece. There's sadly not going to be 900 episodes of Berserk. We're only going to get what they give us because this is a seinen manga. A seinen stuff is like it's not like shonen or shoujo. Seinen stuff is more brutal or to the point, I guess is the best way to put it. And unfortunately for Berserk, a lot of the content that's in the manga, you really could not animate in today's hyper sensitive Japanese culture. I mean, Japanese culture for the most part, this is a country that censors their pornography. This is a culture that has politicians and mayors and governors and people in the Diet Building come out every week or so and say, "Manga and anime and video games are destroying the fabric of our lives." And then it's even worse when stuff that's still kind of weak by Japanese standards comes out over here and we censor it even further. Which, let's be honest about that. That's gross. Censorship is always gross. Now, there's a lot of censorship here because this is broadcast. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the Blu-rays, because most of the time, like with Terraformers, they can be like, okay, here's what we can show on TV, even on cable. Which is weird because, like, American cable, if you are paying for something and it's outside the basic cable, the FCC requirements do not apply to you or your show. That's one thing I've always thought was weird. We have things like AMC or HBO or whatnot censoring content. Like, for example, with The Walking Dead, if you're a fan of that show, the last episodes from the last season have the character Negan in it. Now, Negan is notoriously known for throwing around the F word quite a bit. Like F, 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 F this, F that, etc., etc. He's all kind of like, he's just like that, yeah. And let's be honest, they could run that. They could literally run that and be fine. The FCC standards of decency only apply to basic cable. When you turn on a TV without cable that you're paying for, that's what it applies to. Public television or your local news channels, those have to deal with the FCC. As a member of the member of the media and someone who is registered with the FCC, I understand what those are, and I realize that we can do what we want with those. For example, when South Park on Comedy Central, at that episode where they said the S word several times, they were never going to be fined by the FCC because the FCC doesn't apply to that on cable. Now, when it goes into syndication, which means that you can be on these publicly accessible channels, then that gets censored. In Japan, what they do is they treat stuff like it's a public access channel, and then when it goes to Blu-ray, they restore it to where it was. And they also reanimate it, like Stelvia and wait a second, Puella Magia Madoka Magica. I may have, that's how they pronounced it when I was watching it, so whatever. Anyways, that particular show, both of those were redrawn when they were released on DVD and Blu-ray. And I expect Berserk to have the same thing, which is going to make these last couple of episodes insane. Especially because Mozgus, yeah, that's going to be pretty good. I've been watching this on Crunchyroll, which has actually gone back and re-released the more uncensored versions of these shows with some of their properties. For example, Terraformers, the first season, has the TV cut and then also a similar, more brutal Blu-ray cut on it on Crunchyroll right now, as far as I can tell. I mean, that hasn't really been released in the United States in a buyable format, so who knows where that goes. I do wish they'd go back and fix the second season of Terraformers. I watched the first episode of the second season and was like, oh, this went way downhill. I know people have been kind of on Berserk 2016 because of the whole animation to it, but overall it's for the best as long as it gets done, and that's really what we want them to do. Looking forward to the next episode of this, and yeah, what did you think of this episode? What do you think of the weird draconian censorship that happens with Japanese properties and with American properties when it really doesn't need to? Do you think the government should be preventing us from watching the things we want to watch? I don't think it should. And you probably agree with me, and if you do, let me know in the comments below. If you don't agree with me, let me know in the comments below. Hit that thumbs up, go ahead and like us if you haven't already. Share this, and if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. And until the next video comes out, you are now caught up.